When cops ordered a black man to stop resisting, they were shocked to discover he their police chief's mentor. The laughter echoed out of Marcus's barbershop like a sweet melody on a warm Friday night. Boys of all shapes and sizes waited eagerly for their turns in the chair, sharing secrets and dreams while the clippers hummed. In this melting pot of joy, Marcus, the 42-year-old owner, felt his heart swell. He had dedicated his life to the kids in this struggling Chicago neighborhood, giving them free haircuts and hope, a guiding light in their uncertain world. But that joy turned sour when the sound of shouting cut through the laughter. A noise complaint had summoned the police, their authoritative figures looming outside, dousing the warmth with an icy chill. Marcus stepped out, his friendly demeanor ready to soothe the tension, but instead, he was met with aggressive demands. "Stop resisting," they yelled, confusion clouding his eyes. He had barely crossed the threshold when the situation spiraled. Nearby, Aisha, Marcus's estranged daughter, happened upon the chaos. Her heart raced as she watched her father, a man she had once adored, but whom she now barely knew, treated like a criminal. Anger boiled inside her, burning memories of childhood warmth and afternoon debates. "You don't understand," she screamed, rushing toward the scene, desperately wanting to shield him from the misunderstanding. This confrontation unearthed buried emotions, old fractures inviting their painful sting. As neighbors poured out of their homes, whispers turned into fervent shouts. "Let him go," they yelled, fierce protectors of the man who had always uplifted their community. Marcus stood tall, eyes wide. They spoke of a world where divides should have never existed, and injustices rang out in their hearts. With every voice that joined the chorus, each stood not just for Marcus, but for their shared experiences, threading a tapestry of resilience. Tension filled the air like smoke as the police officers, faces slightly softened by something unexpected, began to question their initial judgment. One officer's chest tightened with regret. He noticed Marcus's calm composure amidst the frenzy, a stark contrast to their assumptions. In that moment, the walls of bias began to crumble, reality checking their beliefs. This wasn't just a barbershop owner. This was a mentor, a father figure, the very foundation their community leaned on. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you could drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As night deepened, the community pressed for justice, eyes on Marcus as if he were their lighthouse in this storm. The police were just men, flawed like everybody else, but tonight they stood confronted by their own prejudice. In the hush that followed, Aisha saw her father's strength, and the flicker of hope ignited within her. Could he be the glue to mend the chasms they had both built? Caught in turmoil, could Marcus find a way to rebuild bridges not just with Aisha, but within the very establishment that had misjudged him? And would the officers dare to see beyond their narrow assumptions, stepping into understanding and compassion? The night was thick with anticipation, leaving everyone wondering how to forge a future brighter than the past they had been handed. As the police officers hesitated, the crowd gathered in closer, forming a protective circle around Marcus. His heart raced, but somehow he felt anchored. The faces looking back at him were filled with determination, a collective pulse of hope coursing through the throng. Friends, neighbors, even the kids from the barbershop, who knew him to be a man of integrity, were there to bear witness to a moment that could change everything. "Stop. Just stop," Marcus finally called out, raising his hands. The urgency in his voice sliced through the chaos, bringing silence that felt electric. "You're making this worse." It wasn't just fear that dimmed the officer's resolute stance, but something deeper, a dawning realization that they, too, were part of the fabric woven by the very community they served. Aisha stood on the edge of the crowd, her heart thumping violently. "Dad, just move back. They don't know you." She didn't recognize the authority in the officer's shouts and saw only the terror of misunderstanding. But Marcus shook his head slowly, his unwavering eyes locked onto the nearest officer, who seemed to wrestle internally with his own biases. "I thought you were here to protect us," he voiced, his tone robust yet firmly inviting. "This is my home. This is my community." He took a step forward, urging the officers to listen, just as he had always listened to the boys in his chair, their dreams and dilemmas spilling forth like summer rain. One officer's gaze faltered, tracing familiar paths through Marcus's life. This was not just a random confrontation. Each officer had sat in Marcus's chair at one point, sharing laughter and dreams. Memories flooded back. The pride in a fresh haircut, the warmth of congratulations on a job well done. Maybe amid their fears, they'd forgotten the shared humanity that connected them. More murmurs flickered among the crowd. People whispered stories of Marcus building skate parks, organizing local events, and advocating for youth. He was the man who believed in second chances, who featured kids facing hardship on his wall of success. It wasn't just haircuts he had given. It was hope, a bridge over troubled waters. Then it happened. One officer stepped toward Marcus, his expression softening. "Sir, we didn't." Marcus interrupted, his voice steady. "I know you didn't come here to harm me, but misunderstanding can sometimes lead to worse." The weight of his words hung in the air, simmering with sincerity. Something shifted as the crowd inhaled collectively, a spark igniting within them. Aisha watched, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Pride melded with fear, care mixed with regret. Was her father really built to break away the chains between them all? And suddenly, a young boy near her, remembering a lesson learned at the barbershop, shouted out, "They don't want to hurt us. They just don't know." It was innocent yet powerful, an invitation to discover who they were beyond titles and badges, beyond assumptions. That boy's words settled in. The officers began to whisper among themselves. In that moment of vulnerability, Marcus saw a path emerge, one filled with possibility. But would they all have the courage to step onto it? Aisha felt something shift in her, almost like a dam cracking open. Could this night become something more than a confrontation? As she took a breath, the question loomed over her, weighing heavy, yet promising. It wasn't just about Marcus facing the officers anymore. It was about her too, facing the memories and the festering distance. What would it take to reclaim their bond, to break down the walls they had both built? Just as she pondered, a lingering gaze from her father danced with hope, and she realized there was still a chance for connection, healing, and a united community. Would the officers choose to see beyond their badges? Would Aisha dare to step back in her father's light? The night held its breath, and the stage was set for transformation, revealing yet another layer of understanding. The shadows of doubt began to fade under the weight of collective potential. What was about to unfold might change everything for them all. What was Marcus willing to sacrifice to bridge the gap? The moment stretched thin, the air thick with anticipation. The crowd remained breathless, their eyes darting between Marcus and the officer stepping closer. Aisha's heart raced. Would this be the tipping point? Would it hold them back or push them forward? "Can you help us see? Help us understand?" The officer's voice trembled just slightly as he asked, his badge glinting against the streetlight. Marcus nodded, a flicker of validation sparking in his chest. "I want to. I really do," he replied, his voice steady. "But it has to be real. We can't just go back to the way things were. Not after tonight." The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. They were no longer mere spectators. They were contributors to a story being rewritten right before their eyes. In the back, Aisha noticed a few familiar faces, each reflecting her own turmoil. Friends who veered away, and families torn apart by unspoken fears. Was this the moment they would bring the pieces back together? Suddenly, another officer piped up, his voice more confident. "What do we need to do?" A collective intake of breath echoed through the crowd. It was a question laden with weight. Marcus looked around, absorbing the faith infused in the air. "We talk. We listen. We learn each other's stories." Aisha's mind raced. What were her own stories? Could she step out from behind her walls? She bit her lip, wrestling with her fear and wanting to scream for her father to bring everyone together. Marcus noticed her hesitation and stepped back slightly, creating space for her to find her voice. Aisha, talk to them. Tell them what you feel. Her heart pounded like a drum. I don't know, she faltered. But Marcus's warmth drew her out like a moth to light. Honey, they're here now. They're listening. It's okay. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the gathering. Listen, it's not just about police and us. It's about every time someone looks at me and sees only a stereotype, not me. The air shifted, eyes widened. A ripple of empathy washed over the crowd. Even the officers seemed to draw closer, curiosity mingling with regret. I see the fear in my classmates when they hear sirens. I feel in my gut every time I see a squad car. I don't want to be afraid. I just want us to be us. Her voice softened, vulnerability spilling from her lips. The young boy who had shouted moments earlier piped up again. We can all play together, can't we? Like at Marcus's barbershop. It's fun when we are together. His innocent enthusiasm fueled the energy, pushing the adults to reconsider their facades. One officer whispered to another, images of childhood memories flashing behind their eyes, playing ball on the street, laughing under a summer sun, sharing jokes with friends who wore different colors. It wasn't just a job to serve. It was about being part of a community filled with stories. We have to find common ground, one officer finally said, voice steadier now. Let us create a space, a bridge, if you will. Marcus nodded, the edges of his lips quirking into a tentative smile. A space for all of us to share, learn to not just react but understand. The crowd responded with a murmur of excitement, a potential future tracing through their hearts. But Aisha's relief was tinged with a new worry. Would this bridge hold when the storms of the world outside returned? As adrenaline surged through her, she felt a wave of hope, but also the weight of responsibility. What needed to happen next? And in that moment, her gaze caught Marcus's. Was he ready to guide them through this new chapter? She thought of her fears, but also the love that had built her relationship with this community. Could they truly break the mold that had trapped them for so long? With uncertainty swirling in the air, Aisha realized what lay ahead could be the most significant thing of all, taking the first step towards a real tomorrow. Would they find the courage to reshape their futures together? Aisha's chest tightened as hope and fear tangled within her. She felt the weight of the moment and its endless possibilities. The crowd was shifting, murmurs echoing like ripples across a pond, full of emotions both fragile and powerful. Let us do this, Marcus encouraged, his voice rising above the chaos. He pushed forward, a beacon of determination shining through the thickening tension. We need a plan, not just words. We need action. Aisha swallowed hard, her mind racing. Everyone was watching. They weren't just looking for answers. They were searching for tangible steps that would bridge the chasm between uncertainty and understanding. Maybe we can have monthly meetups, one of her classmates suggested, pulling Aisha from her thoughts. A chance to talk, eat, play, just be us. The way he said it lit a flicker of hope inside her. Yeah, a woman shouted from the back, a fierceness in her voice. And we can invite the cops. They should see our lives, our joys, and our sorrows. The officers exchanged glances. This was new for them. They had spent years observing from a distance, patrolling neighborhoods, but rarely engaging in the heart of the community. Was it possible they could blend their lives into one? Marcus nodded vigorously. That's it. A community barbecue, games for the kids. We can break down these walls together. His passion ignited the energy in the crowd. A warmth spread through the gathering as ideas bounced around like confetti in a breeze. Let us bring the schools in. We can have discussions with students. Another voice chimed in. Talk about what we want to change. Each suggestion built a bridge crossing fears, misunderstandings, and blame. The officers were starting to see colors in a black and white world, the outlines of humanity coming into focus. Aisha watched with renewed vigor. Change was within reach, but it would require more than just ideas. I want to share stories, Aisha finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, but steady. The stories that hurt us and the ones that make us laugh. The times we feel invisible and the moments we feel seen. She felt herself stand taller, empowered by the energy surrounding her. If we share our truths, maybe we can tear down the walls that have kept us apart. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. All eyes turned to her, absorbing her words like kindling waiting for a spark. One of the officers stepped forward, visibly moved. "I want to listen. I want to know." His sincerity resonated, peeling back layers of skepticism from those gathered. If they could open their hearts, perhaps they could heal together. The teen who had spoken earlier grabbed a small football from his backpack and tossed it to one of the officers. "Let us play, just for a few minutes. We can start right now." The playful suggestion invited laughter, breaking the lingering tension. Aisha felt a warmth spreading through her as laughter mingled with excitement. She glanced at Marcus, seeing the pride shimmering in his eyes. It was a moment she wished could last forever, but doubt whispered in her ear. Would they follow through? Would these ideas become reality? She imagined the barriers between them: fear, misunderstanding, and hesitance, all standing ready to be dismantled. But the ghosts of the past weren't easily quelled. Before she knew it, the crowd was pushing into action, laughter echoing down the street as everyone forgot the weight of their worries, even if just for a moment. A game of catch began, an innocent bridge of connection. But as Aisha stepped back to take it all in, she felt a spiral of nerves. What would happen when the sun went down? Would tomorrow come with the same spirit? She would have to fight for her community, for these new bonds, and for the bridge they all began to build. A sudden shout broke her reverie. What happens next? It rang out, echoing a question everyone was too afraid to voice. And Aisha knew. That was what they needed to define, next to hold each other accountable, to nurture the sparks ignited tonight. And as the laughter continued to rise, she let out a breath, summoning the courage deep within. Could they all rise together to craft the answers? The sun was setting, casting beauty across the streets, a perfect reminder that even the darkest times could transition into light. Aisha's heart raced again, propelled by new aspirations. Could they hold on to this sense of unity as darkness crested around them? As the laughter filled the air, Aisha watched the police officer throw the football back to the kids, his face breaking into an unexpected smile, a rare and genuine glimpse of joy. The tension that had clung to everyone like a stubborn shadow began to lift. One by one, officers joined the game, transforming from figures of authority to players, just like everyone else. Aisha felt the edges of her doubts soften, but deep down, the worries still coiled tightly inside her. "Hey, can one of you guys take my picture?" Aisha heard her friend shout, breaking through the moment. She turned to see her waving a phone in the air, urging them to capture the laughter, the joy, the unfolding unity. Aisha joined them, forming a group around the officers. The click of the camera felt monumental, like freezing time in this beautiful instant of connection. "Say community," her friend called out, and the sound of voices blended into a chorus of excitement. The word hung in the air, a magical reminder of what they were striving to build. But as the photo was taken, Aisha's mind darted to the question that lingered after the festivities wound down. Would they remember this feeling tomorrow? Would they keep working to bridge the divides they had danced around for so long? The sun sank lower, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper warnings of the night ahead. The crowd slowly began to disperse, laughter fading into goodbyes, and Aisha felt a tug at her heart. These moments carried a weight she couldn't ignore, a weight that begged for continuity. "Let us have another meeting next week," Marcus suggested, pulling everyone together one last time. "We can start planning the barbecue and all the events. We can map out our stories, share them loud and proud." Aisha watched as heads nodded in agreement. This wasn't just a one-off moment. It was the beginning of something deeper. But as the group broke away, a voice crept into her thoughts, echoing the doubts that hadn't yet silenced. What if the conversations turned stale? What if old wounds reopened? Those fears bubbled just beneath the surface, threatening to spill over like an unwelcome tide. Her heart raced, feeling the intensity of the moment slip. She could see the beauty in their unity tonight, but could they sustain it? Aisha knew they could only build on this foundation if they were willing to keep pushing forward together. As she started to walk home, the streets that had felt so vibrant moments before now seemed unwelcoming in the growing darkness. Shadows loomed from lampposts, and the laughter faded into the eerie distance. Aisha reached for her phone, a lifeline, and a reminder. If the community was to change, they needed more than plans. They needed a shared commitment. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the darkened corner. It was one of the officers, the one who had initially stepped forward with an openness that had inspired Aisha. "Hey," he said softly, his voice barely cutting through the backdrop of silence. "I want to talk about what happens next. Can we meet? I think we really need to keep this going." Aisha's heart pounded as she realized this might be the conversation that changed everything. The officer was willing to listen, to engage. But could she trust that he truly meant it? "Of course," she replied, matching his intensity. "We can talk about our stories. All of them." And as they stood there in the twilight, each silent second pulsed with potential. Something hung in the air, thick and alive with the promise of change. Could Aisha muster the courage to trust in this fragile beginning? What would it take to keep the flame alive amidst the uncertainties ahead? Aisha was still caught in that moment. The weight of anticipation between her and the officer felt almost tangible. A breath caught in her throat. She could feel the sincerity in his eyes, but doubts surged like a relentless tide, trying to drown out the hope threatening to bloom within her. "What do you have in mind?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think we should hold a series of community talks," the officer said, his tone earnest. "Real discussions, not just small talk like we've done in the past. We can invite people from all backgrounds, everyone with a stake in our community." Aisha's heart surged with a mix of excitement and fear. Could they really tread into those murky waters? A safe space, right? For everyone? Exactly. We need to be open about our struggles, our stories. And yes, anger too, he replied, urgency creeping into his voice. "This won't work if we pretend things are perfect." The shadows around them deepened as Aisha considered his words. In the past, those conversations had often ended in frustration, leaving wounded pride and unspoken fears hanging heavily in the air. Would they truly have the courage to bare their souls? Would everyone be willing to listen? "If we do this," she said slowly, "it's important that we bring it all out. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But what if it backfires?" Her voice wavered slightly. "I get that concern," he said, catching her gaze as if he were trying to peer into her thoughts. "But if we don't try, we risk keeping the divide alive. Sometimes we have to face the ugly to heal." Aisha absorbed his words, the reality of the situation crashing over her like a wave. Trust was fragile. Like glass, it could shatter with the slightest touch. She couldn't ignore how many hearts had been bruised, how many voices felt silenced. "And you're sure your fellow officers will be on board?" "There's work to do, sure, but change starts from within," he stated. A flicker of determination surged in his eyes. "I want to lead by example, show them that we can be more than badges. We're human too." As the silence settled between them, Aisha nodded slowly. "All right, I'll help. This feels right." She felt a swell of hope. Maybe they could forge a path together, one truly paved with understanding. The moment was electric, a spark ready to ignite, but her heart still raced with hesitation. What if this was just another false start? The officer smiled then, breaking the tension. "Let us set a date. Maybe we can use the barbecue as a kickoff. You and Marcus could help me rally folks." "Yeah, let us do that," she replied. "But I need to speak to my friends first. Some might not be as open to this." "Understood," he said, nodding in agreement. "But I believe in this community. If we show we trust each other, who knows what could change?" As Aisha turned to leave, excitement battled with anxiety, her footsteps echoing down the empty street. Could this really be the start of something meaningful? The night air felt different now, charged with possibility. But as she walked away, A question hung over her like the moon above. Would they all be willing to meet in the middle? Would they truly listen and, more importantly, hear one another's truth? The challenges ahead loomed large, but the flicker of hope she felt wasn't easily extinguished. What unexpected revelations lay on the horizon as they tried to bridge the gaps? Aisha spent the next few days on edge, the weight of her decision swirling around her like autumn leaves caught in a brisk wind. Each time she picked up her phone, her heart raced. The thought of approaching her friends filled her with a mix of excitement and dread. They had seen their share of hurt. How would they react to the idea of opening old wounds for the sake of dialogue? "Are you really going to do this?" Marcus asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. He had that familiar skeptical look on his face. "I mean, what if it turns into a mess?" She sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I know it won't be easy, but we have to try. We can't keep burying things. This would be a chance." A chance for what? To get hurt again? For people to get angry all over? His tone was hard, but she could see the uncertainty behind it. Deep down, he wanted change too. A chance to heal. "Marcus," she insisted. "People are tired of feeling invisible. The officer thinks if we create a space together, it could be different this time." Marcus frowned, biting his lip as if wrestling with his own doubts. And what if they don't listen? What if this is just another empty promise? Aisha's heart sank, but she couldn't back down. What if we don't try? What if we miss the opportunity to really talk? Change starts somewhere, right? He sighed, finally uncrossing his arms. "Okay, I'll back you up. But just remember, not everyone will be eager to listen. People are still hurting." The next step was to gather a group. Aisha reached out through texts and calls. It was met with mixed responses. Some were intrigued, hopeful even, while others were resistant and dismissive, insisting nothing would change. Why bother? One friend texted, "They'll never understand." Aisha made a mental note of that response. "Isn't it worth at least trying?" She replied, but doubts gnawed at her. Would anyone really be willing to face the past? As the day of the barbecue approached, she felt sick with anticipation. The officer had put together flyers, and Aisha had handed them out, her hands trembling. They would gather at the park, a place filled with laughter and memories. She imagined the crowd, faces lit by the glow of the sun setting behind them. Finally, the evening arrived. The smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs floated through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and chatter. Aisha stood near the entrance, anxiously scanning the crowd. People she knew arrived. Some waved, others gave a nod, but many shuffled in quietly. The officer was there too, welcoming folks with an open smile. Aisha approached him, fear creeping back in her chest. "What if they don't want to share?" she said, glancing around. "They will," he said, his voice firm with certainty. "Sometimes people just need a push to find their voice." As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over everyone, Aisha felt a flicker of hope. But just as she was about to relax, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was someone from her past, someone who had often been on the other side of the line. Her breath hitched. Could this night truly foster understanding, or was it the perfect storm ready to unleash chaos? And as the first group began to gather near the grill, their voices rising in eager conversation, Aisha gripped the edge of the table tightly, heart pounding. Was she ready for the truth that would come out tonight? Would everyone really listen, or were they destined to repeat the same mistakes again? The moment of truth was upon them, and she could feel the weight of it bearing down. Aisha's heart raced, her gaze fixed on that familiar face. Kenji, the guy she had once trusted, someone who had made her laugh and cry, stood at the edge of the crowd. Memories flooded her happy moments, mixed with ones filled with conflict. How much had they both changed? She didn't know if seeing him was a blessing or a curse for the night ahead. She took a deep breath and looked around. Friends were beginning to gather, each settling into their old rhythms, some sharing tentative smiles. Yet, Aisha felt a shift in the atmosphere, a charge that hinted at underlying tensions. Laughter rang out, but it felt sharp, like a knife ready to cut deep. "Might as well get this started," Marcus said, nervously shifting beside Aisha. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it held a hint of reassurance. "You got this, Aisha." She nodded, taking a step forward, the weight of the moment lifting her feet as she moved. "Hey, everyone, can I have your attention?" The crowd fell silent, eyes shifting toward her. She could feel their curiosity and skepticism pinning her in place. A knot twisted in her stomach, but she forced a smile, hoping to mask her own insecurities. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here because we want to create a space to talk, a space to hear each other out. Many of us have experienced hurt, misunderstanding, and fear. This is an opportunity to connect, to heal." There was a murmured response, a mix of agreeing nods and doubtful frowns. But then Kenji stepped out of the throng and into view. "Aisha," he called out, his voice steady despite the murmurs. "What do you really think will come of this? Do you really think we can just talk it out?" The question felt like a punch, and Aisha braced herself. "I believe we can," she replied, forcing the conviction into her voice. "But only if we try." Another empty promise, someone else muttered from the back. The tension thickened, almost tangible, as people shifted beside her. This was the moment when things could either spiral or start healing. She locked eyes with Kenji, searching for a sign of understanding. They both had past grievances, yet they also shared a history that was much more complex than their disputes. He took a step closer. "Aisha, we've tried this before. How do you know at one T just end up with people throwing accusations and hurt all over again?" Aisha felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "Because we have to try, Kenji. We owe it to ourselves to make an effort. We all have scars, but they don't define us." He paused, absorbing her words. It wasn't just about him. It was about everyone in that park. Each face reflected uncertainty, fear, and that common, desperate longing for connection. This was not just about them. It was about a community. "Maybe, just maybe it starts here," Kenji said finally, glancing at the others around them. "What if we actually talk, really listen?" A wave of apprehension swept through the group, but Aisha could see their tension easing, just slightly. Each shared moment felt like a fragile trust being built anew. Before she could speak again, another voice rose. "I'm tired of being invisible too." A woman emerged, tears glistening in her eyes, her breath trembling. "We are not just stats or headlines. We are human." Aisha felt the swell of hope wash over her. They were starting to open up. Voices that had long been silenced now sought attention. She swallowed hard, ready to guide the group into deeper waters. But as they began to speak, sharing their stories, Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. Would the honesty be met with tears of understanding, or would it spark anger that would darken the whole evening? There were so many layers left unsaid, and though they had taken the first steps towards healing, Aisha couldn't help but wonder what truths lay beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. Aisha glanced around the group, each face telling a unique story. She felt the weight of their shared histories, the heaviness that had long been carried alone. People were beginning to stand, words flowing more freely now, rising with raw emotion. But just as quickly, doubt crept in again. What if their honesty led to a rift instead of bridge? "I don't want to feel invisible anymore," the woman declared. Her voice, though shaky, rang with determination. "We've been spoken for, silenced by your words and actions. It's time for us to reclaim our voices." Aisha nodded, affirming her urgency. "You're right. We shouldn't be afraid to express our pain. These stories can heal us." Kenji chimed in, "But it's not just about recounting pain. It's about understanding what we can learn from one another." He faced Aisha, sincerity in his eyes. "We can't just share wounds. We need to acknowledge our roles in perpetuating those wounds." Hesitation hung in the air as the crowd processed this. Were they ready to confront uncomfortable truths? For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of leaves from the nearby trees, Mother Nature's soft reminder that change was always possible. "I want to speak," came a voice from the back. It was Jamie, a quiet guy, cloaked in shadows most of the time. He hadn't spoken much in the past, often fading into the background. I've been scared of being judged for so long. What if my experiences aren't valid? What if I say the wrong thing? Aisha's heart ached for him. You matter, Jamie. Every voice matters. Your story matters. No one is here to judge. We're here to listen and learn. Before anyone could challenge her, Jamie took a deep breath. Last summer, things changed for me. I witnessed something that rattled my world, and I didn't know how to process it. A friend of mine was treated unfairly, and I stood by, paralyzed. I didn't know how to fight back. He paused, pain etching his face. I felt helpless. I didn't know what to say or do. I was just a bystander, another piece on the sidelines. It haunted me. Silence enveloped the group, the air thick with understanding. They had all felt that paralysis at some point. There was a collective realization that change began with the courage to speak up, to support one another in vulnerability. Aisha, Kenji suddenly called her name again. What do we do after we share? It's easy to tell our stories, but we need to create actions, right? We have to commit to change, Aisha replied, even if it's small steps. But we can't stop at just listening. We have to act together. Find ways to lift each other up in our communities. Another voice broke in, this time more assertive. But how do we ensure we really change? Promises are nice, but actions are what count. It was a young man, and his frustration cut through the air. We post things, we share our stories on social media, and hope for change, someone else added, flowing with frustration. But what happens when the hashtags fade? Will we still be committed? Aisha felt the heat rising in her chest. You're right, she said, urgency behind her voice. Awareness isn't enough. We need solidarity, consistent action beyond tonight. Let us brainstorm what that looks like. People began to murmur, tossing ideas into the growing conversation outreach, community meetings, education, and rallies. The tension began to dissolve, replaced by something lighter. Hope. But just as the atmosphere started to shift, a loud crash echoed from the street beyond the park. Heads turned as shadows flashed. Sirens wailed in the distance, suddenly interrupting their moment of unity. What now? Aisha whispered, the color draining from her face. What does that mean for us? Fear rippled through the group like a dark wave. Would tonight end with a sense of connection or chaos? As the sirens drew nearer, Aisha knew they had to decide. Do they run towards the noise or fortify their newfound bonds? The choice would define their night. The sirens wailed closer, drowning out the laughter and camaraderie that had just begun to flourish. Aisha felt her heart drop, the tension surging back into the air like a sudden gust of winter wind. Stay together, everyone, Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the growing unrest. The crowd instinctively huddled closer, their faces reflecting the uncertainty that swirled in the night. What is happening? Someone whispered from the back, their voice trembling. Aisha kept her gaze fixed on the entrance of the park, her gut twisting with anxiety. The realities they faced every day loomed larger than the hopeful moment they had just begun to forge. Would this incident unravel everything they worked to build? But a small voice piped up through the tension. What we have right now is important. It was Jamie again, who moments earlier had disclosed his own fears. We can't let this outside noise dictate our unity. The crowd murmured in agreement. There was power in their togetherness, however fragile it felt. Aisha took a deep breath. We can't let fear win. This is our moment, she declared, her voice rising above the clamor of approaching sirens. Let us focus on what we're doing here. Let us not become what they expect us to be. Kenji stepped closer to her, his eyes sparking with determination. Aisha's right. If we let the fear draw us apart, we'll be giving in to the same cycle of misunderstanding. His words ignited a ripple of enthusiasm through the crowd, a collective agreement that they wouldn't shy away from their purpose. Let us stand strong, someone shouted from the back. With that rallying cry, hearts began to beat stronger, more united. Aisha felt emboldened as she glanced around. People nodded, fists clenched in solidarity. It was as though the sound of the sirens had become a call to action rather than a signal of despair. Let us use this energy, Aisha said, her voice steady and clear as she pulled everyone's attention back to her. We've talked about creating a space for listening. Now, let us actually listen to ourselves and to the people who are out there. We need to be the change we want to see. Eyes sparkled with connection, an unspoken commitment forming among them. This moment would not shatter their dreams. It would fuel them. Then, as the sirens echoed in the darkness, one officer stepped forward, his face tense yet resolute, reflecting the struggles they all faced. Aisha recognized him. It was the same officer who had shown openness earlier. He bore the signs of conflict, caught between loyalty to his duty and the desire to connect. "What is going on?" he asked, stepping cautiously into the crowd. "We heard commotion, and we came to help." "Help?" Jamie asked, skepticism lacing his voice. "Is that what you call it?" The tension hung thick as questions circled the group. Aisha knew there was so much to unpack, but right now, she had to weave their voices together. "They're here to listen," she urged. "We can't seize this moment without providing them an opportunity to." Reluctantly, they let the officer step closer, and as he looked at them, it was clear he also felt the weight of the world upon him. "I want to understand what you're feeling," he said earnestly. "I don't know what is happening out there, but I want to change the way we interact with you. I want to break the cycle of fear." The murmurs softened. Every set of eyes became a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "But how can we know you mean it?" One woman in the front spoke up. Her voice was a blend of hope and doubt. The officer met her gaze. "I can't expect you to trust me right away, but together we can find a way to listen to one another. We can start humanizing this exchange through our conversations." As his words lingered, Aisha felt a collective breath held amongst them. It was time to steer this night back toward unity. "Let us be the first step. Ask your questions, voice your doubts," she encouraged. "Let us create a dialogue, right here, right now." Kenji chimed in. "And from this point, action. Each small commitment adds up to something greater." With each word spoken, barriers chipped away. People began to speak out, giving voice to their fears, their hopes, and their desires for change. The atmosphere shifted gradually as honesty took hold, and before long, the most astonishing thing began to occur. Empathy blossomed in their midst. "I want something different for my kids," one mother shared, tears brimming as she spoke. "I want them to feel safe, in their homes, at school, around the police." "I see you," the officer said, stepping forward again. "I recognize the weight of that fear, and you're right to demand better." Aisha watched, heart racing, as the crowd nodded. Their hardened expressions transformed into something softer. It was messy and raw, but that night intimacy wrapped them like an embrace. The sirens in the distance faded into the background, replaced by stories, understanding, and connection. The laughter and closeness that had once felt threatened now emerged anew in this powerful act of solidarity. As they forged onwards, each voice became a thread in the tapestry of their community, binding them closer together, igniting a hope that had long been dimmed. The moment didn't resolve all their issues, and Aisha knew the work ahead would be challenging, but tonight they had made a choice to bridge the gap between them and to begin rewriting the narrative of their community. It was in that frail yet resolute setting, amidst shared laughter and vulnerability, that they took the first step toward real change. That moment, Aisha felt something stir inside. It was hope, raw, vibrant, and alive. She realized they could choose to be the leaders of their stories, not just victims of circumstance. As the night rolled on, the glow of newfound connection lit their path, illuminating the work that lay ahead, and Aisha was ready to embrace it all. And just when the laughter and joy felt like they could infinite, the night deepened, a promise in the air that while bridges may be hard to build, together they could stand against the storms ahead. Now, right now, it's your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel. You need to be part of the next exclusive stories we're rolling out. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep this journey going. Comment below with your thoughts, reactions, and emotions about this ending. And don't wait not even one more second. Share this story with at least 5 friends who need to experience this transformation. Your support means the world to us.